On this episode of Red Hot Nuts, we cover the '06 Dakota 4.7 exhaust manifold gasket replacement.
Squadron, thanks for coming on. I like to skip the fun parts and hurry up and rush through the job and fuck up as much stuff as I can off camera, and then come back at the end and make a couple videos to kind of recap what I did. So this is the 4.7 liter V8, and I've been having a exhaust manifold gasket leak here on the very last port. It's been going on for a couple years, but I very rarely drive the truck. Most of the time I'm driving a Volvo. So I finally decided to get in here and fix this, and I knew that these bolts were going to be a real motherfucker to get off. I have the manifold here all prepped up and ready to go back on, and I ruined one of my goddamn screwdrivers getting these bolts out. So what the trick was, or what it ended up being, is I had 3 bolts that were stuck in there, and 2 of them had heads that were on top of the manifold, so I used actually had enough room to get a 4-inch angle grinder in there, cut the bolt head off, and then I was able to get the manifold free, and I was dealing with just the studs sticking out of the head. So at that point I took those nuts that you seen in the beginning of the video, took a couple of red hot nuts, and just welded them on there with my little flux core welder. It took me a couple tries. I got a couple failures laying down there, but I was able to get a couple good welds, and they weren't in the head too bad. This truck only has like 88,000 miles on it, so the bolts weren't too bad inside the head. And I got everything out, and I got my new gasket, and I ordered new bolts. I didn't plan on being able to salvage any of those bolts, so I got my new gasket, and I'm gonna install it here right about meow. Alright guys, leave me a comment if you've ever done one of these before. I don't know how much of a pain in the ass they are, but I'm learning now. I watched a couple other guys' YouTube videos, and they're pretty informative. He pretty much had to salvage all his bolts too. His truck was like even rustier than this one. But yeah, leave me a comment if you got any experience with these 4.7s. So I'm going to make this short, sweet, to the point. I'm only doing the one gasket today here, and I can only go on here one way. If you flip it the other way, it wouldn't fit. So it's going to be with the stainless steel side to the head. And I just got a handful of the bolts here. It's 10 millimeter. I ordered all this shit from Dodge. This is no fucking AutoZone bullshit or parts store bullshit. I personally don't really like parts store parts, so if it's something critical like this that you don't want to revisit and do again, then get it from the dealership or get it online from OEM brand or something like that. So yeah, I prepped this thing with like a flap wheel, got it pretty clean, and I used some sandpaper in there. So I'm just gonna kind of lay this up on there and get a couple bolts in there. Alright, yeah, at this point the job's basically done. I'm gonna dial these things down with the electric ratchet here, and the Horror Fright electric ratchet. This thing's badass for $100. Go get one if you don't have one, and we'll be done. I have to get some new bolts. I cut those bolts off. They were just totally nothing left of them. Had to use a hacksaw. And then check out this hacksaw. Check out the function on this thing. It goes upside down. Look at where the teeth are. It has a position for the blade to go like on a 45-degree angle. That's actually how I had to like get in there and like cut that bolt, because I did not have a sawzall blade on hand. So let's dial these fucking things down. Right, that's a 10 millimeter. 10. Where's the 10? No doubt I lost the 10. Alright, I'm gonna have to use 2 hands to get those bottom ones. Alright, this is what the driver's side's gonna look like pretty much when it's done. If you do this job on your 4.7 Dodge motor, I would recommend ordering the exhaust manifold gasket. Obviously, order new bolts. There is 6 bolts that hold the manifold on, and 4 of them in the front and the back have extended studs to hold the heat shield. I was able to get that in like a kit where they all came together. So I would recommend getting new bolts, and I would recommend buying a new heat shield because mine was pretty rusted out and it was hard for me to even get. I had to like zing some washers in behind that and kind of just tighten it down on there. But yeah, I would recommend buying a new heat shield. I mean, they're probably like $50 or something. And then buy yourself 2.5 inch 5/16 stainless steel bolts and lock washers or lock nuts to put on there. I didn't want to put nylon lock nuts obviously on the exhaust, so I'm going to take my welder here and just put a couple spots right on the back of those nuts so that they can't back off. And then that pretty much completes the gasket replacement here for this. My Y pipe, which is this thing here with the catalytic converter, my Y pipe had some leaks, so I just cut that right in the middle down here, and it looks pretty terrible, but that's where it had some leaks around that heat shield. So I cut that and clamped it back together when I was done repairing the Y pipe. So I'm sure I saved myself some money on that because it has 2 cats on it, or maybe 3, and it's probably not cheap. I didn't even price it, so that'll wrap up the gasket replacement on this Dodge.